So, Western astrology is, what to say, the general flavours of each system. So, longsword karate, astrology, physics or metaphysics, psychology, sociology, sociology and Western psychology. So the general flavour seems to be, or jargon seems to be, at least at white belt level in Western astrology, the general jargon or basic jargon is such and such, say XYZ or ABC or 1, 2, 3, object X in the south node in the third house. So that's the general, at least at white belt level, the general jargon. Object A in the north node in Mars in the 5th house. So it's to do with, I don't know yet what house is in Western astrology terms, but I guess I'll find out. So that is that. Then in Western philosophy, the basic jargon would be like syllogism or syllogistic, ontological, existential. These are all Western philosophy terms, Western philosophical terms within the field of Western philosophy itself. So again, you would have syllogism and or syllogistic, ontological, existential, existentialism. This isn't jargon, but it's just interesting to point out that so that there's a Western saying beyond a reasonable doubt, and that what Western saying is used in general in the West, but it's also used in Western philosophy, obviously, and it's never accompanied by the term beyond an unreasonable doubt, which is quite interesting. But let's do this button up. But what's the word? It is got a general pattern. So these things have general patterns. So Western astrology, Western philosophy, sociology, Western psychology. There's a general jargon, at least at the white belt level or the basic level, intro. The intro kind of level of beginners. So yeah, you have general flavors of things, just like in sports combat, you have general flavors of things like the turn in Ludo throws, the turn and the pull, which again is quite power biased. But anyway, that in modern Ludo throws, you have the pull and the turn. in Kumite karate, you have the in-out footwork with Gyakuzuki, and to a lesser degree, back fist Yurakin, as well as Kazamazuki. So you have like the reverse punch Gyakuzuki, and then the other two sort of secondarily. But there's this sort of in-out footwork and this general linear approach. Yes, there are exceptions and angle steps, but general approach is a sort of linear in-out thing. So this Polymath-ery kind of idea is about common threads, and the common threads are, we can call them flavors of the system, whether it's a academic system or a martial sport. Basically, whether it's physical or mental, more on an academic plane, it's still, there are general flavors, general patterns, which is what this subject Polymath-ery is about. That there are general flavors there, and to just get the general idea of each, rather than getting caught up in what I call thousands of decimal places. So basically, yeah, just to go over, Western astrology is nodes, houses, again, south node or central node. I don't know yet. I'll have to research more, but again, I'm just talking about the general flavour or general jargon. Something will be in a west or a south node or something, and then a second house south node in Aries or Mars, right? The general jargon. Again, I'm a complete white belt at Western astrology at the current moment, so I'm just finding out little bits. So obviously, I'm not going to be an expert at every single terminology. Okay, so bear with that. But that's the general jargon. Is like nodes, houses, and then planets. As for Chinese astrology, I don't know, but it is interesting. People in the West, when they say astrology, would mean, just like when with psychology and philosophy, would mean an invisible prefix, Western. Yeah, so if they said boxing in the West, that does not mean Chinese boxing, it means Western boxing. Or if they say fencing, it means Western. So always, and again, I'm sure that happens in the East too, but the thing to be aware of is the invisible prefix, that there is almost always an invisible prefix when these words are said. Yeah. So yeah, there's a sort of general, what's the word? A general flavour to each system, as I say, whether it's a psychological system or a physical system. You know, like a physical exercise class or session, or as I say, a psychological session of learning and thought processes and things. Yeah, there are common general flavours of each system. So yeah, that's just Polymath-ery, and it applies, as I say, to psychological systems and physical sessions, combat sports, things like that. Possibly Western yoga as well, which is a very bizarre, in my view, very bizarre concept. Very popular phenomenon in the Western world, but very bizarre for my understanding. Although you could say that anything in any kind of culture, whether that be an Eastern culture or a Western culture or a third type, a third style of culture, no matter which it is. I suppose if things are within that, they will tend to look that way to a degree. So you could say that it's not necessarily pre-planned, although there's quite a capitalistic side to this Western yoga, it would seem, in my view. But and then there's that Western sort of materialism ideology that wants to make everything fit into this rigid box. So what, again, having very little knowledge of it, just on the surface of what I can understand of it, Western yoga seems to be purely physical, whereas in India you would have, like Chinese Kung Fu, you'd have tens of thousands of different sub-styles and sub-varieties of yoga. You'd have non-physical yoga, mental yoga, sitting still, all different types. But in the West, it's only, from what I gather, Western yoga seems to be quite capitalistic and very physicalistic, and doesn't seem to have a psychological philosophy, a non-physical philosophy. So the thing in the East that, at least traditionally, I'm sure now with more global kind of approaches, maybe there's an alteration of this thought pattern, but traditionally the Eastern systems, Japan as well, not just Chinese Kung Fu, with Aijutsu and Kenjutsu, and Aikijutsu as well, unarmed, is the non-physical and the physical are linked up, like a non-duality that, like, say, for example, Japanese Zen, the philosophy, and then Aikijutsu, the physical internal martial art, that they're paired together, right? Whereas in the West, maybe 3,000 years ago in ancient Greece, maybe it was different, but it seems for a while at least in contemporary Western thought, Western boxing, or specifically the unarmed ones, Western wrestling and Western boxing, are not accompanied by, in general, a very developed philosophy. They seem to. There is. There's, and people will point this out to me quite probably sternly, and it's true that there is a sort of a philosophy behind Western boxing, say in the West, where they have the concept of heart or soul, or quite primitive kind of words, maybe, because there's not, I don't know, a huge amount of descriptive words for it, but there is a sort of basic kind of thing, but not, again, not, at least say on the surface, looking at it, not what they have in the East, where they have, say Kung Fu, Chinese Kung Fu and Taoism, or Indian yoga and Hinduism, or Sanatana Dharma, as some people like to call it, or Jainism even, or various things, right? They are accompanied by a quite rigorous non-physical component that is just not really there, at least for a long time in the West. As I say, maybe we go back 3,000 years, maybe, I don't know, but there is this isolationist approach in Western thought as well. So there is this fragmentary sort of concept, perhaps, that the physical and the non-physical, and whether it comes from Christianity, I don't know, but it is it's isolationary and fragmented, where in the, again, at least traditionally, maybe it's different now with modern era approaches, but at least traditionally it was more holistic. The non-physical and the physical were more non-dual, and sort of, and it's why, as I say, that not just Chinese kung fu, but say Japanese Zen and Aikijutsu or Aijutsu or Kenjutsu are accompanied by a non-physical philosophy, at least in principle. I'm not saying there weren't, bad people or bad samurai or whatever, back in the day, but at least in principle, that it's meant to be non-dual, they're meant to be 50-50, sort of connected, as I say, whereas in the West, it doesn't seem to be that way. They seem to have had a fragmentary, isolatory approach to Western wrestling and Western boxing, and possibly Western fencing also, where it's maybe not 100% physical, but very high percentage, 99%, for example. So let me see if I can get this. Here we go. Turn this a bit. Right. So it's I'm gonna have to put this underneath. I think I can find it. Let's see, I found it. Okay, is that better? That might be, yeah, it's a bit more light now. Okay, so how it happened, why it happened, when it happened, I don't know, but it does seem to be the case that it's split in the West and it's more holistic in the Eastern systems, at least traditionally and in principle. So yeah, and it's more, especially things like Taoism, more organic. There is this sort of rigidity to Western thought that, as I say, again, is it Christianity? I don't really know, but it's there's more of a what's the word? People call it rationalism or Western logic, or and I'm not against all those things, but there is this thing where if it's not rigid enough, or if it doesn't fit the Western definition, in Eastern philosophy, that it's not valid or something. Again, I don't know how to really articulate this in language, but it seems to be more organic, at least certain branches of Eastern philosophy, more organic and more authentic and more self-explanatory in a way. I would also say, where in Western philosophy, it's something you again have to do, right? But I think, and especially the Tao Te Ching touches on this, I think, and it's not the only book, and I have not studied in any way Confucianism, but it may be possible that it exists within that thought philosophy as well, that you can just sort of be, like in Japanese Zen, sitting under a sakura tree, a cherry tree. You don't have to do a specific thing. You can just sort of sit there and just be and just exist, right? And that's enough. Whereas the Western thought seems to be more outcome obsessed. So it's like you have to do this or you have to do something to get something out of it, you know. And Western thought does talk about the present moment, but not in the way, again, that Eastern philosophy does. So I think they definitely specialize in different things, but I don't know. I think also personality styles will gravitate towards one or the other because of my very right-brained approach, which has strong elements of bias. Fair enough. I will lean towards the more Eastern side of philosophy, whereas someone more mainstream or left brain will, again, these are generalities, there are exceptions, but for the most part, in general, would someone who was more left brain than mainstream wired would lean maybe more towards that Western style thought, Western philosophy, and Western logic and rationality and rationalism, rather. But I think that English empiricism, very bizarre from, I think, 1600s, 1700s, again, sort of kicked off this obsession with materialism that did also have strong components in Greco-Roman philosophy. So it's not only the early modern era in the West that this happened, but it definitely picked up where it left off. And also within Western philosophy, again, for the most part, most people would focus on the ancient Greek antiquity philosophy, and they also focus on the early modern, like 1700s, the English Enlightenment and Renaissance philosophy, but they seem to just completely forget medieval philosophy, which I don't know why they do that. I don't know if it's because maybe people are atheists a lot within Western philosophy. I don't really know, but it does seem strange because it is also kind of a branch of Western philosophy, medieval philosophy, and yet it just really doesn't seem to be mentioned a lot within the Western philosophical community. They seem to focus very hard on two branches. Again, what we would call maybe the pagan branch, the ancient Greek side, and Greco-Roman, and then they focus on the modern, early modern period, say 1700s, Descartes, and then the English empiricism, which is very rigid and things. But yeah, that kind of turned into a different type of vlog, but that's fine. I think all I need to do at the moment is recap the start, which was common flavors of each system, whether that be an academic system or a PE, a physical exercise system. The common threads, as I say, are probably the jargon, and then within the physical, say, side or combat side or fitness, health and fitness side, more movements, but still accompanied with a mindset. So specializations, you could almost call them, these general flavors of specializations, So, as I say, in Western astrology, South Node or North Node, fifth house, Venus or something, right? And then in Western philosophy, existential, ontological, syllogisms, syllogistic, hedonistic even, and negative hedonism, things like that, right? Jargon, but also convention. So if we just make a sort of mental note here that convention is also a very major player in this stuff, not just bias and assumption, which again a lot of people in Western philosophy go, that's a reasonable assumption. Is it? Is it? Is it? I don't know about that. I actually don't know. I would take umbrage with that. I really would. I think I don't know. See, the other problem is that a lot of no, I'm not going to say a lot, but there are certain individuals within the field of Western philosophy that have not studied have not fairly studied Eastern, and maybe again, like me, the reverse bias. Okay, and I'll admit that. I fully admit that. My brain again doesn't gel with that Western rigidity, but if both sides could admit their bias, perhaps, and then come to a compromise, but also self-inquire, which again I don't really see within Western thought and Western philosophy as self-inquiry. I mean, a really good sort of topic for a class or a session would be, or a group session would be, has Western philosophy lost its way? You know, very interesting. And in my opinion, I would say very probably, but that's again comes from a personal bias. But it would be a very fascinating topic to investigate. But yeah, it seems more of a convention, and a convention is not, you know, the absolute be all and end all rigid. You know, it's fixed. There's no grey areas. It's like this way, and it's 100%, and it can't ever move. So convention, really, just like in electrical engineering, you might have a certain wiring. I know nothing about electrical engineering, just giving an example. You know, forwards direction or reverse direction or driving on the left side or the right side. What matters is not the left side versus right side. What matters is convention, is that everyone sticks to, you know, left-sided or right-sided. In the case of, you know, whatever system it is, electrical engineering, for example, you know, again, which I know nothing of, but it's very important that of consistency, that you know, or if people say in the Napoleonic days march their horses on the left side or on the right side, you know, it's important about consistency, not necessarily whether it's left or right. It's consistency. It's that everyone follows the same system so that there's no chaos or pandemonium. So I think in Western philosophy and Western thought in general, it's and very much Western materialism, which is quite, you know, linked in with those, is that convention is not the same as ultimate truth. Convention is just convention. It's like we do it, we go left to right because it's convenient, or you know, in some cultures they write, you know, from right towards the left direction because again, convention, it does not matter necessarily the way. It matters the sticking to it, the consistency and the sticking to a certain way. So it's the consistency that matters, not necessarily the method. I'm not saying the method never matters, it absolutely does, but the consistency here is the overriding thing. So yeah, I think in Western thought and Western philosophy, what they call, for the most part, I would say, or in certain circles that occur very commonly, what they would say is the only way to think, or the only way to use a method or apply a method, is actually, again, convention. For example, jargon. They would say, well, you can only use our jargon, and everything else is invalid or wrong or incorrect. Well, again, that's a convention, not an ultimate truth. It's a convention. So yeah, that's just a bit on different ways of thinking, I suppose, and Polymath-ery, word invention again. Polymath-ery is just the universal mentality behind any external activity, so that the attitude and mentality and approach is the similar. An example would be, you might have trained Filipino Kali with the espada y dagger, the short sword, and then you can apply that to a tree branch, for example. Snap up a tree branch and apply the angles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the short sword angles, So, and those two objects are fairly different, externally speaking, but again, it's the general principles behind the thing that can be applied to multiple external activities, right? So as long as you have that internal, universal mindset and approach, then it's very applicable and very powerful, because it can be applied to so many things. So that's really what this title is all about, you see. And there'll be lots of follow-up vlogs on it, and geology also, with the jargon and the mindset, geology, geography, architecture, metaphysics, sociology, Western psychology, Western astrology, Chinese zodiac. Again, Polymath-ery from my downloading of the concept. Polymath-ery really is not about getting caught up in ultra, and this is, again, not with every type of Western method, but with the mainstream Western method. That seems to be the problem, is getting so caught up in these rigid details that nobody can move, and it's like a psychological kind of holding frame, So and the details are very good, and specialists are very good, and it's all good, but I think as I say, geology, geography, sociology, and things, that there's a common thread there. with me, guys. 2 seconds. I just do this little account for 2 seconds. Right. Right. So, okay. So, yeah, that really is just a introduction to Polymath-ery, again, word invention, but also a sort of analysis and investigation kind of approach, and breakdown kind of within the thought processes, a breakdown kind of approach as well as that. So, and also, as Terence McKenna would say, language. So, language is quite important because it dictates the convention and the jargon, right? Which again, jargon is kind of to do with language in a very big way, and then convention again is a semi-cultural kind of phenomenon, at least in part. So these two components may be subjective, right? Yeah. So it's no, you can use the word universalist or general. Now, really, I don't like the word generalist because it's quite a put-down kind of a term. Yeah, I like polymath or polymath-ery. But yeah, I'm not really talking about generalists here. I'm talking about polymath-ery. And people can look up the difference. And it might be the case as well. Again, this is just a particular hypothesis to finish up with, but it might be the case that at least in some instances or in multiple instances, that things are looked at through different psychological filters or psychological philosophical lenses, so that if you look through something through a green, let's just take analogies, a green filter, it looks a certain way, or a blue filter, or a pink or a turquoise, right? But the actual object in question is the same object, right? So it might be the case a lot when people not only have philosophical debates, but even individuals when they think or use different subjects, as I like sociology or Western psychology or astrology or etc., that it's the same object in question, but just look through different filters. That does not mean that that object isn't the same thing it is. It's objectively constant. It stays what it is, right? It's just that looking through things through different filters can, just like photography very powerful and can make car or a house or a trailer look huge from a certain angle and tiny from a different angle, but it's the exact same object. So angles and perspectives do not negate the object being neutral. It does not mean that object is subjective and always, that it's never an objective item. So different lenses and different filters do not negate or destroy the idea of that object being, there, or the same object. But we'll see. Thank you for dropping in, and giveaways, books, blah blah blah, all something to think about. I have to study a lot of research in order to start up on that pathway. But maybe it's an idea for a future vlog. So yeah.